The Ticket.
Friday, 5 o'clock, late July. This is your last Friday in the month of July. How crazy is that, right? We got NFL football games next week. Andy Avalos is having his kind of introductory season press conference Monday at 11:30. We'll also talk with all the other coaches on staff. Prater, we're going to turn these mics on Monday, and it's going to be a whole new ball game, man. It's crazy.
Get some rest this weekend. It's all over, and we'll hit practice on Wednesday morning, and Boise State football season is off and running. That's beautiful music to us, and I'm sure a lot of Boise State fans as well.
Yep. Okay. Boise State recently updated its football record book, and Prater got his hands on that sucker. He's showing it on camera right now to our video audience. This segment is on video. Prater, we wanted to dissect this record book and see players that are currently on this roster who either might be able to enter this record book or, further along their place in history in this record book. I mean, some big names. Boise State, the one thing you can't argue is over the last certainly 20 years, but even before that, some very big names, people that guys still talk about in this town, Prater, are all over this record book, and wanted to talk about it with this season in mind. Man.
Six current players on this year's football team are mentioned in the Boise State record book. I told you that Taylon Green has made an appearance. He's in there twice now. He's in there last year in terms of career passing percentage. He's ranked 10th in the Boise State record book, 61.3% last year.
That's
was
10th,
his passing.
huh?
So he's 10th on all-time career passing percentage. I would assume that that's going to get better, and he's obviously in there for his 91-yard run, the longest run in the history of Boise State football.
Wow.
Ashton Jeanty is mentioned once in this deal, and he is in there for career yards per carry. He's ranked 12th at 5.26 yards. So Ashton Jeanty makes one appearance. James Ferguson Reynolds, the punter from Australia.
He's in there.
He made it. Most punts in a single season. He came in at 9th last year with 63 punts. I'm assuming he doesn't want to be in there again. I didn't realize he was that busy last year. So the 9th busiest punter in the history of Boise State football, James Ferguson Reynolds, last year was 63 attempts. And then Steph Cobbs is also in this record book. I'm diving through it right now. Static is in here for...
I wonder what stat that would be.
And then we're going to dive into the other two players that dominate this record book. There's two others that we haven't mentioned yet that are each mentioned 8 times. So we'll hit those two here in a minute.
You got to put a Post-it note on that.
I did on
what are you
some of
doing
them.
here?
I did on some of them. Look, there's a little Post-it note right there, but I missed it on Cobbs. You got to fill for 30 seconds.
All right, Static Cobbs, I'm guessing career receptions, maybe he's in the top 10, 12. I'm pretty crazy. I'm still back to James Ferguson Reynolds, the punter.
Yeah.
You said he ranks, 8th or 9th all-time in punts?
9th.
There's only 8 punters in the history of this program that have attempted more punts than James Ferguson Reynolds, and he's only been on the job 1 year. That's like, damn. I mean, James Ferguson Reynolds probably had more punts last year than the entire Kellen Moore era combined. Do you remember? Here's a trick trivia question. Who was the punter during Kellen Moore's time at Boise State? First one to get that is going to get a big pat on the back.
They list the top 10 most punts in a single season, and there's only 2 years in the 2000s that are on here. So 2014 and 2022 last year.
That's it, huh?
The record is 78 in a season set in 1968. We'll move on from that one. I did find Static. Static is in this record book. Last year, the longest punt return. Remember, he was that 81-yard punt return in 2021. I apologize. In 2021, he had that 81-yard punt return. That is 5th in the Boise State record book. But let's get down to the two dudes that are mentioned 8 times. There's a offensive player that's mentioned 8 times in this record book, and he has a chance to be one of the all-time greats at his position. And there's a special teams player that's mentioned 8 times in this record book, and he absolutely is on the doorstep of becoming one of the greatest special teams players in Boise State history. Ballgame, who am I talking about?
Yeah, you're talking on the special teams front, obviously, Jonah Dolmus, and he has 2 years remaining if he wants it. I know we've talked to Jonah. His game plan is this will be his last year with the program, and then he can pursue some professional options he hopes he'll have. But man, Prater, he's hit 98% of his extra points, 116 of 118, and he's hit 88.9, essentially 89% of his field goals. Jonah Dolmas, 56 of 63. And we were talking about this the other day. Remember, Jonah Dolmas missed 4 kicks last year. 2 of them were in Corvallis for the first game of the season when nothing went right for that team. But holy smokes, Jonah Dolmas, he can become the all-time points leader, the all-time field goals made leader if he isn't already. Prater, where's Jonah Dolmas sit in this record book?
The one place that he sits the most secure, you touched on it, career field goal percentage at 98.9%, like you said. The next closest is 80%. He's got a 10% lead on Nick Kalaikai. So Jonah Dolmas is so dang accurate. He will finish his Boise State career as the most accurate kicker in Boise State history.
Wow.
That's a lock. That's one thing you can take to the bank. I mean, he'd have to go 0 for 26 or whatever it is.
Happen.
That's not going to happen. Last year, he came in number 9 for most points in a season at 117. By the way, think about this. Brock Forsey still holds the record for most points in a single season with 192.
That's Forsey's record.
Is in 2002.
Second?
No, Jay Ajayi. Actually, Jay Ajayi and Brock Forsey are tied for first with 192 points. Ian has 152 points.
Okay.
So it was, Forsey and Ajayi were just
wow. They still have the record. For most schools, kickers own those records, Prater. It's rare that a position player scores more points than a kicker, especially on some of those Boise State teams. I guess the fact that they scored so many touchdowns probably took away from guys like Kyle Brossman because the only points they got were extra points because they scored so many damn touchdowns.
Kyle Brotzman is number 1 in school history with most points scored at 439. Right now, Jonah Dolmas is 9th on that list at 284.
Can't catch him.
If he does what he did last year, though, he's going to finish in the top 3 behind Kyle Brotzman, Brock Forsey, and Jonah Dolmas as the most points scored in the history of Boise State football. So I think Jonah Dolmas will become one of the leading scorers in Boise State football history this year. He's also in here for career field goals. He's going to break that. He's only 11 away from Kyle Brotzman. Kyle Brotzman had 67 career field goals at Boise State. Jonah Dolmas has 56.
Yeah.
He'll get that by halfway through the season. So he's going to go down as the most accurate kicker in Boise State history. He's going to have the most field goals in Boise State history, and he's probably going to have the most kicking points in the history of Boise State football and 3rd all-time in points. So he's all unbelievable. Single season records, he's in there twice for accuracy. Career-wise, we told you about that. Career-wise, points after touchdowns, he's 8th right now and could finish top 4 behind Brotzman, Kalaikai, and Dan Goodale. So the PAT thing is working for him as well. So Jonah Dolmas is going to smash this record book. And I can't sit here and say he's going to go down as the greatest kicker in Boise State history, but he's going to be on that list of 2 or 3 really short people.
Yeah, Kalaikai, was he before or after Tyler Jones? What years was Kalaikai? Was this like the Bart Hendricks era into Dinwiddie, or was it Zabransky?
Nick Kalaikai was the kicker before Tyler Jones.
Okay, before Tyler Jones.
Yes.
Yeah, Boise State had some really good kickers over those eras too. Tyler Jones was a wonderful kicker as well. I remember. And then obviously, I know everybody wants to talk about what Kyle Brotzman didn't do, but what he did do is have one of the finer kicking careers in college football history. What do you think about this stuff? 208-424-9300. If you want to join the show on a Friday, talking a little Boise State record book, join the show. We'll get in and talk to us and give us a call. Anyway,
let's
go
dive
to the other
in.
one. Let's go to the
dive into
one.
George Halani.
That's it.
That's the
name.
one. That's the
name.
one. George Halani is 10th right now in Boise State career rushing. He has 2,848 yards. That record is set by Cedric Minner at 4,475. Not going to happen, George. But George with 590 yards.
Okay.
And I think George can do that in his sleep, even with Taylor Green and Ashton Genty running the football.
With 590.
590, he's going to become a top 5 guy. He's going to move ahead of Chris Thomas, and the top 5 running backs in Boise State history after this year will be Cedric Minner, and I'm talking about rushing yards. Cedric Minner, Ian Johnson, Brock Forsey, Jay Ajayi, and George Halani with 590 yards.
That'll be the top 5.
That'll be the top 5. So I guarantee you, without injury, that George Halani is going to be a top 5 running back. In terms of career rushing attempts, if he did what he did last year, he's going to go from 10th to 3rd in terms of carries. Brock Forsey and Chris Thomas were all-timers there, but George Halani is going to be top 3. George Holani, career rushing average is 14th right now at 5.17. There's only 17 running backs in Boise State history that have averaged more than 5 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Boise State has both running backs this year on that list, and Genty and Holani. That's a good sign. George Holani with career touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, he has 19. Ian Johnson holds that record with 58. I don't think George Holani is going to get in the top 10. That's a crowded field. Career 100-yard rushing games, George Holani is 7th. If he climbs up 1 or 2 spots, he might catch like a Jeremy McNichols, who's number 5. Those are the records that George Holani is chasing. For the most part, it's about the rushing yards, the rushing carries, the rushing attempts. A good career, a steady career, and he's going to be high on that record book when the season's over.
You know, I'm looking at this stuff too. Brock Forsey, back to Brock, played 47 games on the Blue or with Boise State, 47, and he scored 68 total touchdowns. I mean,
he was
well over 1 touchdown per game.
Yep.
Boise State has 4 players in its program history, at least since going FBS. I'm not even talking about the others. I'm sure Minter's on this list too that have over 50 touchdowns. McWeapon, Ajayi, Ian, Brock Forsey. I mean, these guys are loaded. For George Holani to get in this company, and I think Bronco Nation holds this company in a very high regard. The feature backs for this program, my gosh, the careers they've had. And George Holani, I mean, if he's not there already, he's a couple more great games from entering this conversation. I know it will really help too, and might not help in the record book, Prater, but if they can win another league title, if they maybe can go to a New Year's 6 bowl game, that's the stuff that people really, truly remember. I think that's why, guys like Ian Johnson and Jay Ajayi might get talked about, and Doug Martin get talked about more than a Jeremy McNichols or even a Brock Forsey or guys who had great careers, Cedric Minter, who didn't play in that mega-sized game, but a lot of impressive stuff in the record book. So This is all fresh, huh? New record book.
New record book came out this week, and 6 Boise State players made it, and keep a record watch on George Holani and Jonah Dalmas. We will keep you up to date on that record watch all season long.
All right, what do you think is next? The Big 12 invites another team, or the Pac-12 does something? Text us, 208-424-9300. Let's get back to kind of this whole college football. What is next? What is going on in this world? It's Prater on the ball game. Gotcha right here on Idaho Sports Talk, KTIK, The Ticket.
From the Beacon Plumbing Traffic Studios.